Hello, gotta go fast enthusiasts. I'm RidersDX and welcome to my channel where today we've got a really interesting tidbit to talk about, and that is the fact that apparently Sonic Frontiers 2 is in development. So I caught wind of this because I was scrolling Twitter like any good content creator does, just like farming the lands, kind of seeing if there's anything coming out that would be good to talk about. And yeah, I just came across this literally like just now. Like I literally just saw this right now and I'm like, well, this is very fascinating, and I immediately have many thoughts about this possibility actually. So apparently this comes from an insider named Daniel RPK. Now I'm really not familiar with most insiders, to be honest, and this is no exception. I have no idea who this person is. According to his Twitter bio, he goes by a Twitter influencer and writer via CNBC. So that doesn't really tell me much, to be honest, but you look at his follower account, he's got over 300,000 followers. So I'm like, well, you don't just get 300,000 followers from like nothing, there's obviously something going on over here. And so he announced that Sonic Frontiers 2 was under development via his Patreon page. Now I did go ahead and shout the bucks to check out the Patreon post, and I immediately regret it because there is nothing here. He literally just says Sonic Frontiers 2 is in development. So I'm like, well, great. Well, I hope you enjoyed my $2. But so don't go waste your time. Don't go and subscribe to his Patreon unless you're interested in like some of the other stuff that he actually does. It looks like he's much more firmly in the world of like movies and TV. So apparently he's quite a reputable insider for a lot of like superhero movies in particular. So definitely go check that out. But I did find an example over here from someone that was commenting on the news, and someone was asking this user ALKUE Max38 what kind of stuff this guy's gotten right before, and he basically said that he did leak the fact that Jessica Jones was going to be in Sonic 3 before Variety did. So I mean, yeah, it looks like this guy does have some legitimacy. I mean, he doesn't really talk about video games as much. He's more so about movies, as we can tell, but he does sometimes talk about video games from what I've gathered so far. So there is some legitimacy to his insider like ways, I guess, and I guess we'll just kind of have to take his word for it. But at the same time, are we really surprised by this news? Is what I'm gonna say. Sonic Frontiers is the best-selling 3D Sonic game. The fact that we got his best-selling 3D Sonic game 2 decades into getting 3D games says enough about it. I mean, it's just completely insane that Sonic is still hitting peaks in this day and age. I mean, it's great. I love to see it, but it really does tell you that like Sonic is really starting to find his groove in terms of like, the movies coming out, the TV shows, and of course the video games. And Sonic Frontiers really did seem like a positive step commercial wise into getting the franchise out there and becoming a household name. So are we really surprised that Frontiers 2 is happening? No, we're not surprised at all. I will say though that like the game probably is codenamed Frontiers 2 right now, just for lack of a better term, but it would also not surprise me if Sega and Sonic Team did decide to go in a slightly different direction as development goes further, and it may be called something else. So this does not mean that we're getting like a straight outright Sonic Frontiers 2. I mean, when's the last time Sega actually did like a Sonic Frontiers 2 kind of game? Like there was Sonic Adventure 2, I guess. There was Sonic Rush Adventure. There was Sonic Rivals 2. I mean, not that many examples, honestly, in a Sonic cinematic universe, I guess you could say. So most games are more so like they take things from the previous Sonic game, but then they incorporate some of their own new ideas instead of being a direct successor. I mean, like I said, the game is probably still very early in development, so it could go either way, but just knowing like the tendencies of Sega and Sonic Team, I would bet that it's more likely that the game is probably going to see some changes throughout its development and be called something else besides Sonic Frontiers 2. But if we did get Sonic Frontiers 2, then I wouldn't be complaining as well. So, I'm open for either. I'm just really glad to see that it looks like Sega and Sonic Team really do want to keep going with the open world formula, because I don't know if I've ever stated this on this channel before. I don't remember if I covered Frontiers that much or not, but I will say that Sonic Frontiers is definitely one of my favorite 3D Sonic games of all time. I think despite all the things that kind of go against that game did something to Sonic that I've been looking for in a 3D Sonic game for a very long time, just revolutionizing the gameplay formula in a way that benefits Sonic. And I really do feel like Frontiers was a step in the right direction. There's definitely a lot of things I would want to see in a sequel, so I'm glad that if we are revisiting that formula, hopefully they do like make it better and like add some more things that I would have loved to see in the original Frontiers. And so I thought I would take the rest of this video to talk about some things I would love to see in a Frontier sequel. And also I would encourage you all to let me know in the comment section below what are some things you would love to see when it comes to a Sonic Frontiers 2, because whether or not this guy is telling the truth or is reliable, he does seem reliable from what I can tell, but whether or not he actually is reliable and whether this is actually legit or not, I can almost guarantee that something along the lines of Sonic Frontiers 2 will be coming in the future. Like, Sega is not going to just dump this formula. I mean, when the Boost formula came out with Unleashed and that was a somewhat semi-success, we saw that formula go on for lots of games afterwards. And so the fact that Frontiers is definitely a more successful game than Unleashed, it is no doubt in my mind that Frontiers, the formula at least, the open world like design that they have going on here, is going to continue on for who knows how many Sonic games afterwards. Like, it just makes sense to me. So with that being said, there are some things I would love to see in a Frontiers 2. I think the biggest thing I can think of immediately is just more diverse level tropes. I mean, it was fun traveling through all these like grassy lands and natural like environments and Frontiers, but man, I would love to see this kind of like gameplay be done in like a Station Square like level. I'd love to see Sonic go to like city environments again, because that's part of the fun with Sonic, is like not just going through like the forests and deserts and such, but also going through like more like urban settings. I think the classic games, for instance, did a really good job of like balancing those two like tropes out. Frontiers really does like dive way too deep into like the naturalistic like forest environments. I think maybe it might have been easier to design a game around those environments, because when you have like a city environment, you have all these buildings, there's a lot more things in your way. It's harder to make like an open environment like you do with Frontiers. But I mean, like, you can still have lots of like natural like open environments, but also mix in some like metropolis slash city like environments in there, or you know, like a power plant, or you know, just like tons of different kinds of level themes. I would just love to see more diversity in the next open world Sonic game. Another thing I would love to see is that I hope they expand upon the Frontiers DLC and include more playable characters in the sequel. I would love to be able to play as like Tails, Knuckles, and Amy again, for instance. I think that would just be a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun to play in the Frontiers DLC, despite some of the hiccups, especially with like Knuckles' glide, for instance. Despite those hiccups, they were still a ton of fun to play in that game, and I'd love to see that expanded upon even more in a sequel. And you can even add more characters. Like, I'm sure they'd want to like add Shadow the Hedgehog, for instance, because if anything, this year is telling me that they want Shadow to be just as big of a part of the franchise as Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are. And so if they want to include Shadow as another playable character, then I would be totally welcome to it. And then another thing that might be a little bit less obvious, but I would love to see, is just more expansion upon Sage overall. I think Sage is a very fascinating character. You know, there just hasn't been like a Sonic character quite like her in the years I've been a Sonic fan. And it's interesting because, you know, she is pretty much primed to be a villain. She's primed to be an antagonist, but she has a very logical way of thinking, and that's what led her to wanting Eggman to team up with Sonic in the first place in Frontiers. And she seems to really vie for the love of her creator, Dr. Eggman. And I just think that's such an interesting dynamic that I've never seen in a Sonic game before. I mean, Eggman has created things before, you know, like Metal Sonic, for instance, but no one that has really had the heart that Sage has had, you know? And Sage is not someone I can see ever going against Eggman, because she is programmed to like love and be loyal to Eggman. She is programmed that way, but she seems to be programmed with enough free will to like think through things like, why is Dr. Eggman acting this way, and why does it have to be this way, you know? I just think that like she brings a lot to the table that I would love to see more of in the next Sonic game. So yeah, those are my three things that I would really love to see in the Sonic Frontiers 2. Obviously this is very like off the cuff, so I think if I really sat down and thought about what I would love to see in a Frontiers 2, it'd be a way longer and more in-depth list than this. So I just gotta say, like, to give my 2 cents, like, I am very excited about the idea of them continuing with this formula and doing more open world games, because I really do think this is the future of Sonic games. I do think that games like Sonic Frontiers, and actually Sonic Speed Simulator for that matter, have really shown us the potential Sonic has in freely roaming through an environment and just like being able to travel throughout a large area in any way that you see fit. It definitely goes against the traditional Sonic mindset of like action stage, finish as fast as you can, move on to the next stage kind of mentality. But I mean, we can still have games like that, like in between these games, for instance. You know, I would totally be up for like more boost games, or even like more adventure style games in between these open world games if they have the resources to do that. We certainly have the resources, it looks like, to at least have more 2D games in this style. So I don't know, I feel like we can have it all, but I really do feel like the 3D open world like formula is Sonic's future, and it's a future that I'm very much in support of. So I don't know, we'll see what happens, but nonetheless, it's really exciting news. I'm very confident in saying that this is likely true, but then again, the game is probably really early in development, so things could change from now, but this is probably where they're starting from. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Are you all excited for Sonic Frontiers 2? Let me know why not, and just yeah, stay up to date, because this may be a developing story, so maybe we'll get some more stuff like in the coming weeks or so. I would say probably not, because I would think that this game is still pretty early in development. I mean, we got Sonic and Shadow Generations coming out later this year, so this is probably the most we're gonna hear about it for a long time. But you know, just knowing that it's a thing and that it's in development is very exciting. But all right, y'all, thank you so much. This is Riders riding out.